Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all. A very warm welcome to the Karl-Renner-Institut to tonight's event with the title, The New EU Term, How to Bring Europe on the Path for a Socially Just and Green Growth. My name is Maria Malcznik. I am the director of the Karl-Renner-Institut, and it's my pleasure to welcome our panelists tonight. And first, Andreas Schieder, a member of the European Parliament and head of the SPÖ delegation in the European Parliament. Welcome, Andy. Then we have here Laszlo Andor, who is Secretary General of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies in Brussels, which is the social democratic political foundation in Europe. Welcome to Vienna, Laszlo. Then we welcome Lorenza Antonucci. She is here. Lorenza is Associate Professor at the University of Birmingham, and she's a member of the FEP's Next Left Focus Group, which I will explain in a minute. Hi, Lorenza. And last but not least, Michael Soder, economist in the Economic Policy Department of the Vienna Chamber of Labour and author of the book Eine grüne Revolution, which we have here. Eine grüne Revolution, which means a green revolution, a new economic policy in times of the climate crisis, which is brand new. Congratulations and welcome. So tonight's event is one of the highlights of the last meeting of the year of the FEP's Next Left Focus Group in Vienna. Next Left is a project, a joint research program run by the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, shortly FEPS, in Brussels, and the Karl-Renner-Institut. It was launched 2009 already, and the aim is to shape the political discourse in Europe with progressive ideas. The program has generated substantial output from its discussions and analyses, and nearly every year a new book is published. They look like this, there are articles written by the members of the Next Left Focus Group, and all those books they address the most significant challenges for social democratic parties and like the European social democracy at the time. So each year there is a different topic. This was the last one, which was written before the European Parliament elections last year, and now the group is working on a new publications. Let me take also the opportunity to thank FEPS and its team, Laszlo Andor, but also Anja Schrippek and Celine Gedesch for the excellent cooperation we share. Andreas Schieder, by the way, is the chair of the project since 2020, already in the 4th year. So, what do we want to discuss this evening? So, the new EU term just started. We had EP elections in June. Now we have a newly elected European Parliament. The Commission just entered into office this week. And also a new president of the European Council assumed office a few days ago. And now the EU and its member states are confronted with many important challenges. Of course, the war in Ukraine and in other parts of the European neighborhood, climate crisis, the need for a transformation, that green and digital transformation. Industrial competitiveness is a huge topic at the moment, and also inequality is always a topic that's an issue for us social democrats. The problem of industrial competitiveness linked also to the green transition is at the moment very much at stake in Germany, but also in Austria and other countries. let me just mention the current situation of the car industry and automotive supplier industry, which are facing enormous problems at the moment. And like the recent event was the insolvency of KTM in Upper Austria, which is an important motorcycle manufacturer that has, like I said, just declared insolvency. And this is only like the most prominent case at the moment, but I think we are also facing like more difficult situations. So the main question now is how the EU can successfully tackle all these crises and all these problems in its new term. Just to point out two strategy papers on the issue. In the last few years, two important reports were published in the European Union, those by Enrico Letta in 2021 and Mario Draghi in 2024. And they already contain like a wide range of proposals and strategies for the EU when it comes to transformation, green transition, competitiveness, social justice, and social cohesion. So in the next 1.5 hours, we will discuss these challenges with, of course, the social democratic approach. And yeah, so some informations. Andreas Schieder will start with an introduction of about 10 to 15 minutes, and afterwards the other discussions will bring in their perspective, and there will also be the possibility for everybody else to join the debate. The company Medienwerk is recording this event for us. It's not a live stream, but it is recorded, and the video will be uploaded later on our YouTube channel. With that, I would now like to hand over to Andreas Schieder and invite him to begin his keynote. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön, and thank you, Maria, and good afternoon or good evening, depends. If you look outside, it looks like evening, but still is afternoon, but this is December classical. Before starting, also, I wanted to welcome also Ewald Nowotny amongst us, because I wanted to take him out of the group, because Ewald was former governor of the Austrian National Bank and professor also for economics on the Economic University in Vienna, and long-lasting also member of the European Parliament, of the Austrian Parliament. And is now chair of the Society, Austrian Society for Europe. Let's translate it like this, and I'm very welcome here. And as it is, the next left is an academic network. I'm very pleased also that you are here. I come more or less directly from Brussels, not directly to here, but let's say yesterday. And I left behind me some very hard weeks, which were very busy. So hearings, political dramas about the commissions, split up with Manfred Weber, fight on how it will be in the future, and also the election of the commission. And I'm starting with this because on the other side, as also Maria mentioned, a lot of changes are happening at the moment in the United States, happening already now, but let's say put in practice in 20th of January. And we will have to discuss how much in the US under Donald Trump will be a reliable partner. I think no longer is a reliable partner for European interest. We have the war in Europe. We have the situation in Middle East. We have right-wing populism on the rise, which is also linked with this security crisis all over the world. So we are anyway in a very complicated situation. And also, of course, all this tendency also arriving in Europe, but still it is, I think, a new commission is therefore important. And as I have said, the election of this new European Commission was, especially for Social Democratic MEP, not an easy decision, because the political program of the Commission was so and so. The personnel composition was so and so. In the past, it was also some sportive activity of the European Parliament to show its muscles by denying 1, 2, or 3 candidates for commissioners to enter into the post. This time, I think it was more important to look also on the content and show the muscles in integrating the content, but also knowing that the political field of the new European Parliament and also of the Commission as a mirror of the political situation in the member states became more and more complicated. And of course, there are also some Commission members which did not make us so happy, and there are other ones which make us extremely happy. But at the end, I think it was important to take also this Commission into office to make them start working. And I think this is the most important thing, that Europe is having a structure which will be able to answer the question. And by the way, saying so, I think also from a social democratic perspective, is at least the commissioners which have a social democratic background also got the portfolio which are speaking about the issues which we as social democrats defined as very important ones. And I will come on this later. Spoken about global challenges, we should not forget that the climate change is a challenge which is a massive global challenge. We see month by month, we see statistics by statistics, we see by flash floods and other catastrophe emergencies everywhere. But this time it is also, first of all, under criticism by conservatives, under attack by right wing, and also, of course, has to be implemented, and has to be implemented in a way that our planet has to have a priority, but also, of course, it is accepted and implemented, which is linked to acceptance. So, as I said, we are facing resistance from the right wing regarding these issues, but I think it is important. And saying so, I think what is the most important by implementing is today, as we also speak today, about a socially just and green growth in Europe. And this has to be linked or maybe also used as a jump forward for a new industrial strategy, which is also important. And regarding this topic, there is one name very prominent around, is Mario Draghi, and the other one is Enrico Letta, as Maria also mentioned. I have to say, probably is the two important Italian former prime minister which also could contribute to such issue. All the other, probably most of the other former Italian prime minister would not be able to contribute useful to this debate. And it gives us a lot of thinking, and it also shows where Europe is weak. And there are some key factors, because Europe is on the danger to fall behind. If we simply look at the numbers, how much the US with the Inflation Reduction Act and how much China in the last years is investing in infrastructure, in modernizing its structures, then we see that Europe is on the danger to fall behind. And as they say, 750 to 800 billions a year would be important or necessary to mobilize and to keep track also with the tendencies. Big number. So therefore it is important, first of all, how to mobilize the money, but secondly also how to implement wisely such programs. So we have some, and this is then always the big issue, where the money comes from. Member states don't look like the big source of contributing. So I think, as it is also a European challenge, we need a European approach. The next generation fund which we introduced must be used as a tool for this. So the prolonging the new next generation fund must exactly to work on this and to be used to finance joint European investment project to overcome the borders which are still existing, to help to complete the internal market, and also especially in infrastructure, railroad and other infrastructures, which we also need, from electricity cables, internet, harbors, and so on. And I think also it has to be said, because everybody is also in a discussion on but how much money we should spend, how much debts we can afford. But we have to make also clear this is a classical question of public goods. And public goods, of course, have to be jointly financed, planned, and also implemented. And we should not take the risk of being undersupplied also in the future. When we look where we are, also from the 50 leading technology companies globally, only one is a European one, for example. So therefore, also we have to be aware, we have also to work on this, and there are some key takeaways. We need to modernize the economy to be fit for the future with an European agenda, which must also include social justice, the climate fairness, and stability. And also it is imperative that we have to decarbonize our economy and also to create a circular economy, which implies also being less dependent on strategical materials and less depending on certain countries and supply chains. And this getting more independent, I think, is also an important issue. And there comes in one global block, which is we need to talk about China. And I think we should therefore also have something in a positive way which says Europe first instead of made in China, which must be the industrial strategy also for the future. But China is also a synonym for a lot of other blocks. We could also speak about India, we could also speak generally of Southeast Asia, and we have also to see that the US is also there an issue. So as I mentioned, we have to work on this, and as also was mentioned, we are facing an industrial crisis everywhere. In Germany, we're discussing the automotive sector, in Austria as well, as we are on the supply chain for them. I think it is more important, instead of discussing about the automotive sector, to discuss about know-how, investment and jobs in the mobility sector, because then we would see there is also the train sector with producing locomotives, wagons, tracks, signal technology, communication technology, and all these issues. And there is a lot of workforce also in. But of course, this independency, getting more independence, is about also, of course, internal security and also of supply chains. The best example is the 75 to 90% of world's wafer manufacturing, the famous chip issue. Capacity is located in Asia, and therefore Europe has also to do more to bring this back. Or as Draghi was saying, trade policy towards China has to be pragmatic, cautious, specific, on a case-by-case basis, and defensive. And I think also this has to be said. To start an economic war like Donald Trump is announcing is not helpful in this issue. I think the important thing is not to attack other ones, but to clear up our European agenda and to make us stronger in this field. Do we have the tools? We have. When, for example, we look at the Executive Vice President of the new European Commission, Teresa Ribera, is responsible for a clean, just and competitive transition, which is, let's say, a Green Deal with a red heart, which is her responsibility. So it's industrial policy, but also bringing the questions of green and decarbonized circular economy, which we will discuss also later on. Having said so, also when we speak about energy, for example, there is the issue of energy prices on the table. And again, it's about dependency, but it's also about a lot of other issues, and we should not ignore that we have the phenomenon of also energy poorness or energy poverty in our societies. And this is with a change. Always, of course, this kind of problems are increasing. Therefore, it is especially important on this and on this issue, and also the housing issue is back on the agenda. But also we have to say this new commission with our Danish commissioner has now housing and energy in its portfolio, while also we can say, okay, what means housing policy on European level? We will not build up, like in the Red Vienna, communal housing, the so-called von der Leyen Gemeindebau. We will not have this. In any case, we will not have this. But also, it is more to bringing together the resources, to look on the framework of subsidies, of possibilities, of planning, but also of subsidizing the renovation of housing, of thermal investment, new windows, new roofs, the heating systems on a prices basis which is affordable to people. Just also some look in the statistics. I think Spain and Italy are the champions in having younger generation living with their parents, beyond being young generation, because the age is 30 and something. I have to say 30 and something, I brought my son already to school, and of course was not, luckily not living with my parents in these days. So it's also a question at the end of society, of independence and of our model. So to come to an end, with our new Commission, we as the European Union, we are ready to go. We will have hard times, because this global situation will be hard. We will have hard times because also in Europe, Orban and other ones, will not be easy to bring these things through. And also the majorities in the European Parliament have changed. There is nothing such a big coalition in pro-European big coalition. There is more parties to the extreme right. There is the center right, which sometimes does not act as center right, but also falls to the extreme right. And there is Social Democrats, Liberals, and Greens, but which are not able to push any agenda by themselves, but always need other partners. Will be a hard fight, but we have also the tools with some commissioners, as I mentioned, also to put legislation on the table and to negotiate this. And the uncertainty will increase. And I think even there is more important to have an idea where our society goes, because we will have upcoming German elections, we have the political crisis in France, and so the two countries which usually functioned as a motor of European integration on a crisis themselves as well. And also here in Austria, we are still negotiating, and I would also say economic circumstances in Austria and in Europe would also need that we quickly have a new Austrian government. And also there, I think it is, even if the government will not be able to have a clear social democratic agenda, probably will not put in practice what we promised in the election campaign, everything, at least not, it is always important also to be on the table, because in uncertain times, it is important also to be on the table where the decisions are made, because in uncertain times it's not only about planning, long life planning, but also on reacting. And there is a lot on the stake, and this we have to look at. And I think it's like always to combine the big issues, industry, climate, and social cohesion in our societies, and this is only Social Democrats which bring together. And therefore, I'm happy for going a little bit deeper into this issue today in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I would like to invite my fellow panelists to join us here. So Andreas just gave us like a broad view on how what's the actual state about European politics and EU politics right now. I would like to start with you, Laszlo Andor. You were Commissioner actually for employment and social affairs in the period between 2010 and 2014, which was quite a different time. You were also a commissioner from Hungary, which is which we are now far away of sending a social democrat, like Hungary sending a social democrat to the European Commission. But anyway, we never know. We're working hard. We're all together working hard on it. So also from your experience as commissioner, and now you see how like the EU institutions started the new terms. Where do you at the moment see the chance to actually act in the way that Andreas just outlined? We need investments. We definitely need to stick to our plan of the green transition with a red heart. We Social Democrats kind of sit on the table, on the deciding table, because the S&D group in the European Parliament is still a very big factor in the EP. Where do you see actually the possibilities and the chances that the social democratic agenda can also shape the next years in the EU?
Thank you for the question, and also for reminding ourselves about my time at the European Commission. Indeed, that was also a crisis time. And I think after listening to Anders Schieder, I think there is a similarity, which means that when you enter office with a collective, with more or less cohesion, it's very important to have a plan, it's very important to have a vision, but at the same time, we also need to know that the environment around us, the reality, might not be entirely favorable. So yes, 15 years ago, it was 15 years, 2009, 10, right? A long time ago. It seemed that the world would emerge from a great financial crisis, and then the EU outlined this Europe 2020 strategy for smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth, and then the Eurozone crisis came, and there was a lot of setback as compared to the plans. So now I think it's important to start with listing what possibilities exist and what are the necessities, because it's not only about opportunities, but certain things like continuing a climate agenda. In my view, this is also a necessity. It's not an option, basically. You cannot opt out from certain policies just because there is discontent, but this is something we can discuss. At the same time, we have to prepare for adversity. I think the difference between the two periods is that in those times, the Eurozone crisis, which came against us, was very much endogenous. It was a kind of European-made, and the rest of the world actually was recovering much faster from the Great Recession. Now, I think what we have to expect is more an exogenous crisis and exogenous challenges. What comes from the United States, from the new administration, which when there was a previous Trump administration, they launched various forms of economic warfare, trade wars, basically, against specific European actors and countries. And I think we should expect nothing less. But at the same time, continuing instability, wars very close to us in Ukraine, but also in the Middle East, and nothing out of this is favorable for Europe. So I think how this ambitious agenda to continue with climate and digital transitions and social justice meets this reality is going to be an extremely demanding one, not least because our own political family has a somewhat diminished representation in the European Commission, and this is also something which colleagues are pointing at. I always point out, just to make a last comparison, that when I was in the Commission, we also started just 6 out of 27. Now it is 5 out of 27, so the difference is not enormous. So I think with good coordination, you can do a lot, even if your team is in minority.
Thank you very much. Michael Soder, you are, I think we can say it like this, a trade union economist, and you've been specializing in the matter of green transition quite early. You were one of the first trade union experts on this topic as an economist. Now you're one of Austria's leading experts on the matter of economic transformation. So, like the Green Deal was a a huge deal in the last in the last period of the European Parliament and Commission, and so there have been a lot of legal not only proposals but also like laws that became reality. From your point of view, how, what's the current state? What is missing? What is needed now? Which initiatives should be taken? So, at which point do we stand now when it comes to the green transition, and where do we have to go?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I think the European Union started with the ambitious goal of the Green Deal to be the front-runner continent in the green and digital transition years ago. And now we have seen that the implementation of the policies that come from the European Union are at a very different speed in the several member states, and that leads to a leakage in a time lag in the implementation of the policies that are necessary to speed up the transition processes in our economies, in the industries, and so on. Now we are facing a situation where we are more or less between a rock and a hard place between the US and China, with China has ambitious goal to be the world leader in green and clean technologies. And we see a shift in the industrial policy strategies of the European Union, more towards the direction of competitiveness and also militarization of the European industries. And I think we have a very clear look on the social dimension. Not that the social dimension is not forgotten in the process, in the pressure from China and the US, that we have to take care that the social dimension stays in the heart of the Green Deal and stays in the heart of the policies that we have to take care of social inequalities that arises from the transition processes, because that fair transition is the only guarantee that the political will be there to bring the transformation in reality. And I think that is the very focal point for the next couple of years, to have an eye that nobody left the social dimension in the backyard and bring it in the foreyard. That it's a centerpiece, in my opinion.
And is this a matter of like European Union decision making, or is it this? Are we actually in a situation where it's more about like national states, member states, and implementing the current legislation?
I think in the last couple of years, the European Commission has the ambition that nobody is left behind. In all acts and laws from the Green Deal, it was proposed that there is this huge social dimension of the transformation process, and we have to take care. In reality, you have the member states, they have to implement a clever policy design with respect to energy costs. Energy poverty was also mentioned earlier from Andreas. I think it's on both sides necessary. On the European level, to get the mission, the mission and the impression where we have to steer and direct the economic development, and on the member states level to speed up the processes within the member states.
And how do you think Austria at the moment is doing with implementing let me say, like transition policies? Not just like implementing the Green Deal, but also like we have, for example, there's a transformation fund in Austria that's funded with like 3 billion euros,
5.7,
even more, even the double, with almost 6 billion euros. You're also involved in the monitoring and like in the ministry of this fund. How is this working?
In Austria, we are in a situation there are many measures in place, like the climate and transformation of offensive, with this 5.7 billion euros for the decarbonization of energy-intensive industries. But the challenge in Austria is there is no big picture, no real strategy, no industry strategy, where you have a path, a political path, how to develop and where you should develop in this transformation process, and that is a fallback against the European Union that are fostering to build up strategies, the Clean Industry Act, the Net Zero Industry Act, the Clean Industrial Deal coming up in February next year. And I think that's a crucial point, to have a little bit of bigger picture, not only singular measures. You need a mix of different measures to achieve a fair and fast transition.
Lorenzo, we're now kind of switching topics, but not really. You're an expert on social policy, but also a sociologist. So we are finalizing like this year of elections, this super election year worldwide, and what we see also in Europe, but in other countries around the world, that that matter of transition and transformation and green transition is causing for some disturbance among, like in our societies, and which also reflects on election results, for example. So most obviously, people tend to be disturbed, like when it comes to the transition and the transformation our societies and economies are in. So there's obviously a huge fear of loss. People, and it's not only a fear of loss, like people are literally losing their jobs at the moment because there is a turmoil in our industries. And so what's like your analysis on that? So which kind of people like are affected by that, and how to deal with this?
Okay, thank you for the invitation. First of all, I think what you don't want to do is what happened to Macron and transfer it to the EU level, because of course with the Macron mandate, you found out that taking a green transition, ecological decisions can really backfire in terms of the impact on the redistributive impact on your population, and therefore can cause a lot of disturbance to democracy, and as well as a loss of political support. Well, in my studies, I look at insecurity in general, but we know that the ecological transitions has implications in terms of the level of socioeconomic security. There was actually a report published by Mandelli, Pallier at Sciences Po just a few days ago on the eco-social risks. So kind of thinking about the individual implications of the green transition on individual, basically, security, which is, I think, a great new field of research and policy making that we really need to look at. But in general, yes, I think this is happening in a situation where Europe is already as a record level of insecurity in a way that I think historically it's probably unprecedented before, say, the Second World War, right? So you're actually adding more insecurity to a situation where the fear of job loss, but also the quality of work and the satisfaction of work has been record low. And I think Austria has been a little bit protected of this in the last decades compared to, say, the South or the East or the liberal countries. And Germany too, in part. And I think what is happening post-COVID is that some of the countries that are, also because they have very solid systems of collective bargaining have been protected, are actually experiencing also things that the south of Europe has experienced for a long time, I would say since post-2010, but even probably before in terms of work insecurity. And the cost of living crisis is also coming up. So you really have a number of factors that can really come together. So the green transition is just the cherry on top of really a security crisis, I would say. In my view, there has to be a really change in paradigm in terms of what the compensatory mechanisms are. I think we really moved away from the idea of having compensatory mechanisms at the individual level, and we using a more individualistic language of empowering people and enabling people, but not actually making people safe. And I'm not sure that really delivers when it comes to the ballot box. And I'm not sure it even delivers economically, because to have all the systems in place, it's actually quite expensive. I mean, like, the systems of checking that people are productive. And so I think we're slowly finding out that we need new, because we don't have to necessarily go back. I think the labor market has changed and the mechanism of protection will be different, but we will need new mechanism of social protection at the individual level. So I think a part of this is also moving away from the focus on the microeconomic programs, which I think is still dominant in the EU. I really don't think we moved much to the idea of social investment since the 90s. This is the only alternative to austerity has been social investment for over 30 years. And this has not really paid off at the ballot box. And this is not really new compared to, I would say, Juncker, Commission, and etc. So I really think that there has to be a little bit more focus on the individual mechanism, on the individual policies that you communicate to people, because people don't really know much and frankly care about the macroeconomic record, the GDP, the unemployment rates. In the US, you have a similar debate, because in the US they say, oh, but the GDP is quite high, unemployment rates are low. Yes, but people's experiences in the labor market are terrible. And this is reflected in the way they vote. So you don't want to end up with a similar situation when you're saying to people, oh, look, our GDP levels are great, our unemployment rates are in line with our macroeconomic track records, but no, this is not really changing much in people's lives. So you really need to go down to the kind of individual policies that can have an effect on people's lives. And I think people came up with loads of solutions in the past decades, such as redistribution, different levels of, conductive taxation, also some levels of basic income, etc. So I think these could be productive ways of kind of offering contemporary compensatory mechanisms.
I mean, the matter of inequality, I find this really interesting. But it's also quite abstract, isn't it? Like when we always say that like equality is rising and we see these in our figures, but I think it's sometimes hard to process for people.
I think equality, yes, but insecurity, no, because insecurity is about asking people, what are you doing? So are you struggling to get by at the end of the month? What is your work situation? Do you have a good relationship with the management? Do you have a good work-life balance? These are like things that people individually say. Social status is another metric now is used everywhere. You're basically asking people, how do you classify yourself compared to the others? So it kind of gives you a proxy how people see themselves. Equality, yes, equality is hard because it's always relative. But I feel like individual conditions are quite kind of easy to get to, more than, I agree, macroeconomic inequality, which you often don't have the perception of. In fact, the people who are at the bottom of the income scale often have the impression of not to be at the bottom because of relative perception.
Andreas, how do you see this actually? Because like in EU politics, everything is always very much about macro numbers and like the big funds and the big numbers, and how can you actually communicate to the individual realities to the people, like from an EU point of view. And you're also working a lot about industry politics, but also transport, because you're also in the transport committee, and this might be actually something that addresses like people very individually, for example.
Yeah. I think that the problem, and this is also a political problem, that of course European-wide 27 member states, the comparison, if you are where you, let's say, are classified in the society, is even worse, because living conditions in poorer countries like whatever, Romania, Bulgaria, of course, completely different than living realities in Germany. And also in Germany, we see between West and East, there are differences. So this, I think, is one problem, how to create a European way of thinking and of a European solidarity, because this is also one reason why it is so hard to implement a momentum of pro-social policy on the European level. For example, in the last period, there was the discussion about the minimum wage, a European one, and it created amongst normal people more questions about what do you mean, and will be my minimum wage now a Bulgarian minimum wage, or while I'm sitting in Denmark, or things like this. And at the end, you need to, and then you have to come to this number. No, it's in comparison to the GDP of your country and so on, which I think is a very wise one, and it will be on the long run extremely important when it is perfectly implemented for bringing people together. But of course, this is one reason why it is not easy. And uncertainty, I just mentioned about this. I think we have now different ways of uncertainty about the future. We have the wars going on, which is, let's say, the classical deep-going threat on the future. We have the climate issue, which we also all see. We don't like the summers anymore, and we don't have the winters anymore, and we have floods and things like this. So we see something is going on. It's affecting also the prices of living, of heating, and of cooling, and whatever. And also it divides the society even more. There's a difference if you have a pool or if you have a little house exposed to the south and not isolated. They are coming now also the classical social economic uncertainty. Will I have a job? Will the job which I have also feed me and my family for the future? And this is also coming very strongly. So therefore, I think it is important to address all these issues. And the answer, this is, I think, our problematic thing is, the answer is social policy and economic policy, and this is very much linked still to the decisions on the member states, while this uncertainty and fear about the future is already European-wide.
Thank you very much. I'm looking into the audience, and would like to ask if anybody would like to intervene. I have Thomas over here. Is there anybody with a microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for excellent interventions. I have two questions. First, I like what Lorenza mentioned, that we should think about new instruments. I would like to ask you, what do you think about potentially introducing something like green dividend, green allowance, which might be financed through, for example, EU ETS system, and the revenues raised if we also bringing additional instruments, for example, like CBAM. So whether assisting people at the individual or household level through green dividend that might be contemporary and might be financed actually from some of the, let's say, regulatory instruments we use to stimulate green transition. And the second, I haven't heard much about the issue of how currently a lot of people perceive that the redistribution actually works, because a lot has been discussed about how to promote transition of European economy and industry towards, let's say, more sustainable, less carbon intensive, or put it on a less carbon intensive pathway. And in many cases, actually, we are reversing the redistribution. We are now using more and more taxpayers' money to subvent big business, large companies, large industrial complexes. And I think that a lot of people feel that there is an inherent injustice in it. And I think that that's why also they believe, okay, I'm not doing well, and my tax tax money are now used to pay to the more or less transferred to the pockets of billionaires. So maybe have we underestimated this fact? Have we prepared for the fact that, okay, there need to be some compensation also for those who are also negatively affected by green transition, especially some part of the working class, part of our societies in rural areas, and nobody is actually like speaking about how to help them, but that they are asked, okay, now we need to help the big business to adapt to new challenges.
Thank you so much for this question. I would like to take one from Joao as well.
Thank you very much. I will focus a bit on what Lorenza mentioned, because it's the crisis is now affecting Central Europe in a way that has been affecting southern countries in a consistent manner for a while. And my question are twofolded. One, would this at least, I would not say abandon, but at least spark a real discussion inside of the Social Democratic family regarding the Economic Monetary Union and Maastricht? We just adopted the fiscal, the economic governance rules recently, but is this going to be sufficient to dispute this principle as Social Democrats? And second is a more institutional, also a very difficult question, because we know the political situation as it is, and I'm one of those that understand the almost practical political impossibility of having a treaty discussion. But my impression is that, well, I was there still in April, but there is a feeling that since April the EU is not paralyzed, but in a very slow decision-making process. It's December, so it was 8 months. The world doesn't wait 8 months for us to have a decision and to have the capacity to respond to the challenges that happen. And I have a stronger and stronger feeling the more I talk to people in different parts of the world, but also in South America, that Europe is the last continent that is living in a Eurocentric world. All the others are somewhere else. So what is the capacity, the response capacity that we are going to have as a project, as a common project, to speed up the decision-making process, also in terms of implementing the reports that we have, the Draghi report, the Letta report, that are going to require tremendous public investment in order to, in a context where political fragmentation exists and does not favor the allocation of the resources and funds that are needed to put these programs in place.
Thank you very much. Maybe we start with Thomas' questions on, like, first the green dividend, but also the huge question of public funding of like private companies in order to achieve the transition we need. And we already experienced this dynamic very much in the last couple of years, also with the COVID crisis, when like all the EU competitive laws were loosened. So public subsidies became more and more important, and the question is, how do we deal actually with a distributional problem this causes? Maybe, Michael, this is something you could start with.
I think the answer is twofold. We have the situation that in the transformation processes there is high uncertainty out there, because there is no, or at least to say in some member states, in Austria, in Germany, we have the discussion about the combustion engines and so on. There is no common pathway and trajectory where we will develop, and that increases additionally to the existing uncertainties, the risks and uncertainties further. Therefore, we have to make the transformation pathway clear. That the European Union tried this by consolidating and asking for transition pathways, to develop transition pathways, to take a little bit uncertainty out of this transformation paths. And we see in the industries that there is a necessity of high front-up investment under the precondition of these high uncertainties. So now we have the situations that there is this investment needed, and the state that through taxpayer monies tries to reduce or to de-risk these investments a little bit off. And now under the topic of fairness and social justice, we have to take care if there is plenty of taxpayers' money going into these companies. It's not a one-way ticket. So there has a reward out of this, and you can design this reward in different ways. And I think one really good instrument to do is our conditionalities. It's a very strong instrument, and in Austria we talk about location and employment guarantees for different time periods, or for getting these subsidies, reinvestment conditionalities. And in Austria, in this climate and transformation of money for the companies, we have implemented as one conditionality so-called transformation plans. And that means that the companies who get this money, the energy-intensive industries for projects, have to lay down a plan together with their employment representatives. That includes participation rights in the design of the transformation processes of the company, as well as qualification plans for the employees. And I think that's the crucial element. You have to bind subsidies on some form of conditionalities that make this instrument not one-way money for the companies, but so that also the public and the employees profit from this sort of de-risking.
Lorenzo, maybe this is something for you. Like the question of fairness. Like, do people feel like it is fair that like this huge amount of public money like goes into like the companies? And do you think this is actually a good response, like to include workers' representatives, workers' councils, to much more maybe like link public fundings and public subsidies with inner company democracy, for example, like and industrial, like classic industrial relations progress? Is this something like this individual story you referred to before?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't think corporate welfare is started now. It's a part of the welfare state. And actually, Patrick Diamond, who's not here today, he has a paper on this about the UK and the role of corporate welfare a little bit. But yeah, I think that most people are not aware of how much money goes into helping, actually supporting companies. If they were, there would be a little bit more arranged than they are now, probably, but it does play into this the populist sentiments, which is fundamentally against the elites. So I think, yeah, the idea of redistributing the cost and the benefits of the green transition it seems very important in terms of like avoiding, as I said before, the backlash of green policies would being unpopular and actually resulting in a further rise of especially the populist right. So yeah, it seems that has to be. But again, because I don't really see the EU having committed to this before, having actually the with the European semester. I think the EU has a lot more, I have to say, power to influence the national policies. But has not happened in the direction that I was hoping to see before. I don't see how that is going to change now that fundamentally we have a quite right-wing commission. No? So, but that's important in terms of the role of the Social Democrats. To actually argue for a shift in the way, say, the European semester, for example, is used. Which we did like 2020 already, but yeah, a little bit more, and pushing further. I'm hoping that this shift of the European Commission on the right is going to make the Social Democrats shifting on the left, basically. Sort of polarizing the politics a little bit more on the left, though.
How do you see this, Laszlo?
I think the European Union is facing a choice, and much of this dilemma is indeed crystallized in the so-called Draghi report. The Draghi report has very minimal social chapter, but I think from the point of view of the social policy, it's very important that the Draghi would stop pushing the old-fashioned notion of the competitiveness, which was the case at the time of the Eurozone crisis, when the competitiveness was simply translated to cost and wage competitiveness and put a pressure on wages, and in some cases, like Ireland, they had to throw out the collective agreements at that time. At the same time, the question is whether the European Commission and the member states would like to buy into this completely, or just use the Draghi report to pick and choose from different things which they really like. And I think without, let's say, buying into the Draghi report completely and using it for a paradigm shift, it's going to be very difficult to face up to all the challenges which the EU is facing now, especially the one which is described as the so-called investment gap. That there's a long list of needs on climate investment, technological investment, social investment, and in order to have all this ready and possible, you would need to mobilize more, not simply for transfers. I think transfers are not the essence. The possibility of credit, which is Draghi speaking about, and raising the possibilities of investment with common instruments. I don't want to be more specific, but common instruments is the name of the game. So either we can jump to this new stage and also connect with Joao's question, who was asking this, north-south polarization in terms of the opportunities and what kind of impact different crises make on the north and the south. Of course, it's typically the south which is on the receiving end when there is an asymmetric shock in the European Union, which has been discussed many times in the last 10-15 years. The problem is now that it's very difficult to raise this question because some countries in the north, namely Germany, are also facing some kind of downward spiral with their industrial situation. And the last thing they would like to reopen is a discussion about Eurobonds and counter-cyclical policy in the EU. But if we take it seriously on the basis of Draghi, which von der Leyen basically gave to each and every commissioner to discuss and promote somehow from their own specific angle, then this needs to take place in the form of a serious discussion in the next few months.
Andreas, Joao also raised the question of treaty change and like the internal procedures in the EU. You've been working a lot on that in the past couple of years, also as like in the framework of the conference on the future of Europe. What are your thoughts on that?
When Joao already put the point of quicker decision, I think it factually is completely right. European decisions are so long and lengthy. On the other side, also partly, of course, the democratic quality, bringing the parliament in and so on, makes the things even more lengthy. They also lengthy before, but also at the end. So the question is also about the quality of decision making, and cannot to shorten decision making quicker without with losing, let's say, parliamentary and taking everybody on board. Secondly, treaty changes and things like this, of course, also reflecting the more complicated political situation. There is, first of all, there is no political center. Secondly, the two big countries which have the power to impose or push things through, also in a political crisis, not only in an economical one. And there is the right wing on the rise, which also makes things more complicated. So I'm not sure if it's the best moment to jump into a treaty change, because I don't know if it is so wise if Orban and the others have their fingers in the treaty in the future. But I think this is an open question. The Parliament has generally been very progressive in this issue. We will see if this new Parliament has the same progressive momentum, or also will be a very negative one. The second I wanted to answer on this green dividend, I think it is in the question also of that people themselves ask, where is the benefit for all this green thing which you're discussing? And they have the feeling that all this climate change, green transition is the hobby of some woke freaks, which like oat milk and other things, and complicate and is very convinced people which know every detail about vegan leather and things like this, which in the past we simply called plastic. But anyway, and this kind of thing. And I think therefore, I think, and this is what people, especially those which we are, let's say, responsible for, see as our political goal is, they want to have standards. So it's not, they don't want to be a freak and an expert how to get organic, means more healthy food or less polluted food. But simply they want to have standard that when you go in the supermarket, you grab a food or you grab a chicken, that this is, let's say, an organic breeded up chicken and not industrialized produced. So this, I think, is the important one. Secondly, also it's about, the green dividend is about also the center of the economy. But must be also in discussions, using less resources, which generally is an economic principle. And there are, I think, things like also rail, because you mentioned before the transport issue, investing in a traffic infrastructure which is affordable, punctual and available for everybody, and green. This is where people then see a dividend. And then we don't care if it's a green one, if it's a red one, if it's a social one, if it's a more practical one, being more mobile, or more green on the issue. But I think this is in so far important, because the green agenda, or what we understand as green agenda, is in the heart of the founding process also of social democracy and labor movement, because it was bringing people out of rusty, dark chimneys, swallowing all what was coal production and so on, to have a life also where you can afford. And this famous Karl-Renner from Renner-Institut then founded also an organization like Nature Friends, which was bringing workers also out into a nature. And this is, I think, is the same story today. So it's not a project for some little convinced people, but it's about life quality. And therefore comes in social as well as affordable, and as well as health. And then we are again in social structures discussion as well.
Now we have to explain that Andreas is the president of the organization Nature Friends here in Austria, which is a great organization. And you can join as a member, and then there are great infrastructures for hikes in the Austrian Alps. Great huts and restaurants, and also environment. I'm looking. Yes, Ewald, please.
Thank you. May I take the chance of this, I think, very interesting meeting to try perhaps a bit of a different approach. I think the Social Democratic Party at the European level should be careful not to be kidnapped by the Greens. And we should be very clear that we are not we have different concepts to the right, but we have different concepts to the Greens. Otherwise, I think the Green project in this traditional form has huge problems. The main problem is that they totally underestimated the costs, or they ignored the costs at all. And of course, the basic problem is also that there was the idea that Europe as such can be a pioneer and the others will follow, which is not the case. And so therefore we have set very ambitious goals, which we, by the way, will not be able to meet, but which still has the effect that we have an avalanche of regulations and so on coming on those European industry. We therefore have, in fact, we have it already now, a deindustrialization of Europe. We see that new industry is investing, but not in Europe. It's investing in US, in Asia. And we have, in addition, this very strange idea that we have these very ambitious goals. And if you don't meet these goals, you even have to pay fines. This is unique worldwide. Nobody else has this. So I think one really has to find a kind of a new way of thinking, a bit in the way how Aneshita said it, that yes, it should be, let's say, a productive-oriented institution, movement, with also an idea of having quality of life in this green sense. But basically, we have to have a functioning economy. And a functioning economy has to be based on functioning markets. It is an illusion to think that just by paying subsidies there and there and there, you can do it. You have to have these functioning markets. You have to have functioning research. This is a field where you can, public financing may have a sense. But I think basically social democratic policy, also on the European level, should be to be very careful against this, let's say, green strategy of adding more and more regulations, of binding industry, binding not only the industry, but all aspects of life. And this is, therefore, we have this backlash. And I think to have this, let's say, combination of productivity-oriented, competition-oriented, and market-oriented policy with the idea of having quality of life, I think this is something that is a future for the Social Democratic Party. Otherwise, if we are just the second Green Party, we will have the same fate as the Greens. We will go down and down.
Thank you very much, Margaret.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this really interesting discussion. And I had 3 questions, but now I'd like to follow up on what Novotny said. I would recommend to not play green against red. I think that's the wrong strategy because climate change is pretty real. And it can't be escaped, and it does affect us differently, but it affects us and it will continue to affect us. So it might be over-ambitious by the European Union or by the Commission to reach certain climate goals at a certain point in time, but what does prolonging to not have those ambitious goals, what does it do for us? I think on the long run, it doesn't really do anything for us. So I'm in favor of ambitious goals. And also in favor of actually putting policy into place to really follow them or actually implement them in a just way. On the just transition topic, you mentioned the transfer funds that are now available for energy-intensive industries in Austria. My question is, why only for energy-intensive industries? Is this the criteria? I'm not quite familiar with the funds and the strings attached to it. I think the strings attached to it that you have to also do something for workers. I think this is great. It's a very good idea. But there is lots of green jobs that are not labeled as such. People who work in hospitals. That's low energy. That's a low energy job. We have lots of people working in health. We're going to have more people working in health because the population is aging. So is the economy for also these funds, is it limited to the industry? And then I would be critical of it. what's the notion of economy? Is the foundational economy, is it a part of it? And if not, then it should really be a part of it. And then, I mean, a green transition is expensive. You need to invest. I get that. But do we really have to play the catch-up game? Or is a green economy also like an economy that, to a certain extent, tries to get out of the catch-up game? Yeah, I like the idea of, to not talk about the automotive industry, but to talk about the mobility industry. That's a very good way of putting it, because we do produce trains, etc. And other important parts for a green transition in the mobility sector. So maybe for automobility, is it too late? And maybe it's not so bad that it's too late. We kind of messed it up.
Thank you very much. Carlo in the back, and then I'm closing because we are already reaching the end of our time.
Yeah, I would like to just ask a question to anybody. Yeah, for anybody who would like to comment, because it was just said a few minutes ago, this is not probably the time to think about treaty changes, especially given what are the majorities right now in many European countries. And I totally understand that topic. But it seems to me the world is going in a direction of a more politically managed trade. For example, if we think of the bipartisan approach in the US, China, and so on. And it's a time in which objectively we need, on many fronts, not just trade, a more unitary European approach. So how can we try and overcome, national egoism if we cannot go for a treaty change?
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to give back to our panelists, and I'll let each and every one of you just pick the questions and choose your responses. And I would also like use this round to also conclude our panel, because we, like I said, we're already reaching the end of our time. And there will be some snacks and drinks afterwards, so everybody can continue to discuss. I would like to start with Michael Soder, please.
So, thank you very much. Very good question. Maybe I can combine the question from Ewald and from Margaret. I think what we are seeing is that markets on their own will not do it. So we need some form of steering from mechanism that guide the economic development into that direction. And I think the argument is not only a green argument. It's also an argument for employment and value added in the future. So what we are now seeing is that China has a strategic, since the 90s, a strategic political approach to push for green technologies, and Europe developed huge strategic dependencies in these technologies that are needed to stay competitive in the global field. So I think we need the productive sector for employment and value added, and we have to modernize it in this direction. And that leads me to the question, is it only the energy intensive industries? No, it's also clear that investment in the foundational economy and infrastructures is needed. But the question before was of the subsidies in the energy and these sectors, and we have now in place through this funding opportunities, possibilities to shift and push for the decarbonization of energy-intensive industries, because they have huge emissions. And you have huge gains in the emission targets if you bring down the emissions of the energy-intensive sectors. But that doesn't mean you don't need the investments in the infrastructures, you don't need the in the foundational economy. I think both is needed. In my opinion, we see currently in the European debates a strong shift on this competitiveness questions, and we have, if we want to play a part in future in employment and value added in future, we have to take part of this technological diffusion, of this technological shift, and to safeguard the producing sector in Europe, because this is the guarantee for well-being and material well-being in Europe. But it's not the whole story. You're completely right.
Thank you very much, Lorenz. Do you have?
I guess the only thing I wanted to say is about sort of continuing with the way the economy worked before, and sort of not going to the Greens agenda is not, I think, a possibility not to go there at all, not to become Greens, but of course just to ignore it, because we know that, you know, climate change has different effects on the population depending on your class, just simply. So it wouldn't be social democratic to just ignore the issue and continuing with the as per usual. So I think you would have to address it in a way or another. Then the issue is how to address it so that it's redistributing the cost and the benefits, basically, of the green transition.
Laszlo.
If I could also pick and choose, I would also start with the question of the green and red dilemma, because I think this is a relevant point, but I have a slightly different optics on this. I think the excesses do not necessarily come from the Social Democrats imitating or copying the Reds, but the Greens, but the limitation of the tools at the European level. At the European level, we have a glass ceiling over the budget, but we don't have a glass ceiling on legislation and producing, regulatory actions. And that's why, even if sometimes the real solution would be a budgetary tool, because it's not possible for political reasons, but the expectation is that the parliamentarians would do something about it. What is the solution, or what is the answer? They bring out another legislative initiative. So when it comes to the Green Deal, indeed, any Green Deal needs to be a combination of investment but also regulation. But which one dominates? I think we would agree that the investment side would need to dominate, because it helps developing new products and then new jobs and then new industries, green industries or clean industries if you want. But because of these limitations, almost by definition, the regulatory aspect, at least in the perception, the regulatory aspect is going to dominate, and that risks the whole public support for the green agenda. So that's also why, even if it's not a good time, there is never a good time for discussing EU budget, this needs to happen, right? And from this point of view, the anticipation of the German election is perhaps a good thing. Because in order to take a bigger commitment or a bigger step in any EU level initiative, you need governments in place which have a longer mandate. And then without this anticipation of the German election, we would be in a situation that nothing happens before the German elections, which would have been in September, and then nothing happens before the French election, because then it's coming very close, and then Macron or whoever is there is not going to take a commitment. So now, if there is a good 2 years between the two, this would be perhaps a sufficient time for a political engagement and an engaged debate, and at least for a new model, multi-annual financial framework, this would be possible, right? So, which we speak about volumes, which we speak about an insurance principle, whether it is investment or unemployment, or instruments like the SURE, which was so good at the time of the corona, but also in face of other shocks, it would be something similar, would be very, very useful. So I think I think the Draghi lesson, if I can add one more, is that we are behind the schedule with everything, because most of these instruments should have been invented either with the Lisbon strategy or with the Eurozone crisis or as a response to the Inflation Reduction Act. But now it comes in a congestion because so much was not delivered in the previous times, because you always had a plan B, or you always had a substitute solution, but the European Union cannot be built just out of plan Bs. You need at some point to arrive to a genuine construction, and because of the existential reasons, I would agree with Draghi, Letta, and all other reporters that perhaps this time is now, and it's probably unmissable.
Some additional quick remarks. Not ignoring now your question on treaty change. I still think we need a lot of, but not to elaborate on this. I've just three remarks. I think most important in a situation like it is now to have investment, which is European investment, and there follows then the instruments how to organize the money and where to go. So if we start and for trans-European infrastructure networks and so on, I think there we also knocking on the door of the common market rules, because sometimes the common market rules enable that our investments are not going into European industry but to other ones, but we play still inside extremely hard market game, which at the end is, let's say, only affecting negatively European industry and opening doors for other ones. And the third one is also implementation, because very often also we have big European programs, but then when they arrive at the place where they have to be implemented, not following exactly the idea, not being completely quickly implemented and so on. And this, I think, is also, this would be an answer for also treaty change, because maybe if the European Union has an investment plan, should also be the one who is investing on the ground and looking if it's arriving and not sending through 5, 10 regional government channels, which then at the end, if they do something completely different with the money.
Thank you very much. We cut it here right now. Thank you so much to the panelists, but also to everybody else who contributed to this, in my opinion, very substantial debate about like the beginning of the new EU term. Of course, we haven't mentioned many political issues and many political fields like social progress, for example. We would have a lot to say about that as well. Trade policies, and also this very important matter of peace in Europe, but also in the rest of the world. But I'm sure we will have plenty of options to continue our debate. Many of us had a long day already. Some of us already still have some work to do this evening after dinner. That's why I found it important to stay in time. Thank you, all of you. Hope to see you soon again, and have a good evening.